You didn't fail to act, you failed to understand. Most people don't fail because they couldn't act, they fail because they never truly understood what they were looking at in the first place. In the last video, you noticed the threat, now what, the act phase explained. We talked about execution, what happens after a decision is made. Today we're backing up a bit, because long before you act, the outcome is already being decided inside your head. And that happens during orientation. This is part of our OODA Loop series. It's episode 8. OODA stands for Observe, Orient, Decide, Act, developed by Air Force Colonel John Boyd. And one of the biggest mistakes people make, especially in self-defense circles, is treating OODA like a checklist. Boyd never did. In fact, Boyd made it clear, orientation is not one step, orientation is the engine. Everything else flows from it. I know in previous videos we talk about orientation as the step after observation, but orientation is not just thinking about what you saw and whether it's a threat to you. Orientation is the sum total of your training, your life experience, including knowing about cultural differences and how some different cultures or people respond differently in various situations. Your expectations, your stress response, your biases. Boyd described orientation as the place where we constantly destroy and rebuild mental models, trying to predict what's about to happen next. And here's the part most people miss. Orientation doesn't come after observation. Orientation actually determines what you notice at all. In law enforcement, we used to say, you don't see with your eyes, you see with your brain. Every environment has a baseline. That's how people normally move, how they normally interact, what behavior belongs there. Experienced patrol officers learn this quickly. You can step into a location or scene and immediately feel something's off here. Not because you're psychic, not because you're paranoid, because your orientation has learned the pattern. And if you've ever heard of the Marine Corps' Combat Hunter program or the book Left of Bang, this is the same idea. Different language, same human problem. Boyd called it orientation. Professional training emphasizes establishing a baseline, noticing what doesn't fit, and recognizing subtle behavioral changes. Boyd was describing this decades earlier, just without modern terminology. Let me give you a real-world law enforcement example. Two officers respond to the same call. Same address, same subject, same time of day. One officer notices hands moving without purpose, body bleeding, delayed responses. The other officer sees just another agitated person. Same observation, completely different orientation. That difference determines distance, positioning, readiness. When things go sideways, people say, it happened so fast. No, it happened exactly as fast as their orientation allowed them to understand it. Here's the hard truth. Under stress, your brain doesn't rise to the occasion. It falls back to what it already knows. That's why experienced officers and trained professionals focus on recognizing pre-incident indicators, not reacting once violence is already underway. Poor orientation leads to confusion, delay, bad decisions, or paralysis. This isn't about speed, it's about being correct sooner. You'll often hear, you just need to cycle through OODA faster than the other guy. That's not Boyd. Boyd wasn't obsessed with speed, although he was a fighter pilot. He was obsessed with disrupting the other person's understanding. If I can force you to constantly reorient while my understanding remains stable, I don't need to be faster, I just need to be right. Criminals rely on surprise and ambiguity for exactly this reason. They're not trying to outfight you, they're trying to collapse your understanding of what's happening. Here's an everyday application. This isn't just about violence. Think about driving. You're driving the same route 1,000 times. That repetition builds orientation. You notice a car that doesn't belong, a driver behaving out of sync. But routine can also blind you. That's why sometimes you don't even remember your ride home after a long day at work and you're tired. You get home and you can't even remember the drive home. Orientation can work for you or against you. That's why awareness isn't about being on edge, it's about maintaining an accurate mental model of the environment. This is where training actually matters, not because it makes you aggressive, not because it makes you faster, but because it changes what your brain expects. When you train pre-incident indicators, distance and positioning, hands, posture, and movement, you are rewiring your prediction engine. And when something doesn't fit, your brain flags it before conscious thought. This ties directly back to the previous video when we talked about the act phase. Action without sound orientation is just motion. In the next episode, we're going to talk about OODA training to condition your mind to respond faster. We'll talk about how to deliberately shape orientation before stress ever enters the picture. Because the real work of OODA happens before the threat, before the decision, before the action. If this series is helping you think more clearly, not more fearfully, make sure you're subscribed and please share it with anyone you think will benefit. And if you haven't watched the earlier OODA videos, start there, because awareness isn't paranoia, it's pattern recognition done correctly.